Thank you and welcome. My name is John Spain. I work for the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. We're delighted to have you here for the last public meeting for this phase of our work. Please, once again, if you would, raise your hand if you've been at all the meetings. That's what I thought. Well, thank you. We're honored by that. I think we've averaged about 300 people at each of the public meetings, and we're delighted to have you here. We have empty chairs up front now for those that need them. As I said a moment ago, we decided to do this meeting a little differently. What you see here are new drawings that hopefully reflect the conversations we've had with you. On this side, you also see some detailed maps showing the various activities that we've heard you talk about around the lakes. I'm going to make my remarks very, very brief, and then I'll have Kinder, our lead consultant, come back up and walk you through what we're going to see. But the idea is rather than sit and talk to you for 2 hours, we wanted to bring you up to date and then let the consultants meet with you in small groups or individually, answer your questions, and spend some time with you there. We will be here as long as you need us to be here. It's just a different format, and we wanted to spend some time answering more specific questions. Carolyn McKnight is here from BREC. State Representative Steve Carter I saw in the back just a moment ago. I think Councilwoman Wicker was going to be with us tonight, so I welcome all of our elected and public officials, many of whom who have been here all along. And I see Senator Dan Claytor coming in, who is your state senator, and we appreciate his being there and his support for this project. Let's do Kinder. If you have other questions that he can't answer related to where we go from here, I'll be happy to come back up and answer them to the extent that I can. So thank you again for being here. I should say that we have not only Kinder, we have the entire team. We've got the engineering team here as well. So I think we're going to be prepared to answer most, if not all, of your questions. So with that, thank you again for being here. Kinder?
So how many times have I been here? Well, I've been to Baton Rouge a lot. Okay, I grew up here. But coming back for these meetings, we've had a lot of them. And each time, we get a little more specific. We started out with just big questions for you guys, like, do you want sports? Do you want nature? Do you want water quality? What are the key themes that you're interested in? And after each meeting, we kind of got a little more detailed, a little more specific. And so, people have an easy time saying, I like sports, right? But then at the last meeting, it was very detailed things, like, I don't like that in my front yard. So very specific little comments. So the comments get more and more detailed. They get, which gives us more difficult things to work with as we go through. But I think we've done a great job of really picking up, listening to what people are interested in, keeping in mind that this is a complicated project. There's a major university that wants very specific things. There are people that live right alongside this project that want specific things. And there's people across the parish and across the state that are willing to help pay for this project as well. They want very specific things. And so it's about putting all these things together in a plan that people want to go out and use and implement and really enjoy. So what have we done? I'm not going to read all this stuff. We've read all this stuff before, right? Okay, but this is a great picture. Susan Turner, who does a lot of his work with historic landscapes, has been a big help to us in understanding the history of the lakes. And I think the takeaway from this image is that from the time the lakes were built, remember, it's not a natural system. This is a garden that looks like nature, right? But from that time when it was first built, they didn't really work. They weren't really designed. Some engineers built a dam, they put a road around it. Back then, 1929, nobody went jogging, nobody paddleboarded. Kayaks, maybe they were invented, but you never saw one on these lakes, I assure you of that. Things have changed, people do much more different activities, and we have to keep up with the times. The other thing that happened as soon as this lake was built is that there were fish kills and algae blooms, all this stuff happened, right? The same things that are happening today. We're trying to fix it. That's what this project is about, let's fix it. People did go canoeing. They still go canoeing, right? We want to make sure that all that history is maintained in our new plan. But I think the main thing is that reminding people that the lakes are at a tipping point, right? If you look at Campus Lake, it's filling up. Just from the time that I went to LSU, started in 1980, that lake is like half full of willows and debris and soil, and the rest of the lakes are going to do the same thing. That's just that's the thin edge of the wedge. So lots of public engagement. We have lots of meetings that we've had. We've listened to people's comments. We let you guys build parks and figure out what you're going to do with the dredge to help us understand how to work with all that stuff. That helps create a project that we know the community is interested in seeing completed. So the key themes that have come out of public engagement, improved water quality, that's the main thing that I've heard. When I started the project, I didn't expect that. I thought people were going to want other types of things, but water quality is the key thing that kept coming up over and over and over again. And so as we've gone through the process, we've put more and more emphasis on trying to get there. How do we get to a cleaner water, or as clean as it can be? A healthy community, people want to be able to continue to go out and do the things that they do right now around the lakes, but they want to do it in a more safe environment. They want a place that's sort of that touch point in the center of the city where you can meet nature, but you can also meet your friends and colleagues. So tourism, that's the other thing that's important. And when we say tourism, we're not trying to make this into some gigantic, tourist attraction. The idea, though, is that birding is a huge deal, and people travel from across the country to come and see birds. You can see a pelican here. People will come here, they'll stay in your hotels, they'll eat at your restaurants, and if you can start to think about how things like that happen, and there's a tax base that goes with that, that's a good thing. That's good. And world-class destination. This is the one that I think I've gotten the most questions about. So what is world-class destination? I want to talk about that one for a second. So world-class destination means this. There's a guy in Portland, Oregon, and he's talking to a friend, and his friend says, "What are you doing next week?" He's like, "Well, I got to go to Baton Rouge for this work thing." He's like, "Oh, I'm sorry for you." Yeah. Because he's never been there, and his friend's never been there, right? So he comes to Baton Rouge, and he's stays in a nice hotel and eats in a nice restaurant. And his friend says, who's here for the work thing with him, "Hey, I heard about this lake thing. Why don't we walk down and check out the lakes?" They get on a bicycle they rent, they ride around, they see a pelican. They go to a birding center, they can rent binoculars, they can see birds. They see people on paddle boards, they see people running, doing all kinds of cool stuff, right? That guy goes back to Portland and his friend there says, "How was Baton Rouge?" That was a real downer, right? And he says, "No, it was pretty amazing. They have this awesome lake system. There's all these people out doing all this healthy stuff. It's totally different than what I thought and what I had been told Louisiana and Baton Rouge was about." That's world class, when somebody gets that kind of energy and excitement about a place that they never thought they would. So what happens? He's not going to turn it into Disneyland, but next time he comes, maybe he brings his family, right? And people write about it and they think differently about it. That's world class, and I think the Baton Rouge is ready for that. That's important. Okay. Master plan. So when we started the project, this is what we had, right? I said, there's all this dredge and dirt I got to deal with. I'm going to make a bunch of little tiny islands and I'll be done. I thought, well, maybe not. Maybe we'll make just one big island in the middle. And I don't know, the guys that came to the first meeting knew that maybe we would make the island look like Mike the Tiger. I don't know. We didn't do that, right? We also said, hey, maybe lots of cafes and restaurants and all this sort of stuff. And people said, we're not so sure about that, right? So we have this master plan, and we'll look at it in more detail in a minute. But these are all the things that we heard you guys say that we were wary of. We wanted to be cautious about, right? So cafes, you don't see cafes on the plan now. Parking lots, we've reduced the amount of parking lot. We're being sure that we size them appropriately for the handling capacity of the lake system. Boardwalks and behind people's houses, those are gone. Wetlands, they've been sort of diminished in size. They're still going to do the things that we need them to do, but they're smaller than they were when we started. The size of the lake, people were very concerned that, is the lake going to get too small? We've gone in, we've made sure that that's not going to happen. And Stanford, oh my God, 3 lanes, it's going to kill the entire city, right? Traffic will be shut down. We've taken that out of the plan. So we've heard you guys. And the things that we've put back into it, more habitat, more emphasis on hydrology, more emphasis on family. One of the things we've discovered in coming back and forth here is that there's lots of stuff to do on the lakes if you're 28 or if you like to run, but if that's not your thing, there's really nothing for you here. We want to make sure that there's plenty of other things, for a lot of diversity, lots of different age groups can take advantage of this great resource. Connectivity, safety, these are the things that we've heard and that we've tried to turn the volume up on in the plan. As far as trying to get to cleaner water, there's a lot of different systems that we're using to get there. This is just sort of the taste of how we start to clean the water. But this is kind of a big piece of it. So as we start to clean the water, this aquatic habitat is improved. Different types of animals are going to come along and take advantage of that, right? So that's nature in the city. And if that's going to happen, we want people to be able to take advantage of it too, right? So each thing that we do under the water, we want someone to be able to take advantage of above the water. Right? This stuff all gets paired together. So we start thinking about trails and passageways and how people can take advantage of these sort of things and the types of spaces that we might start to build. We think about nighttime. in how lighting wants to be very low level and quiet and very respectful of bird life and all this sort of money that we're going to be spending on habitat. And we start to get then looking at all these various systems in the plan. So we look at the slopes, how steep are slopes, how much soil do we put in various locations. We start looking at these new areas, what do we do with them? You're creating park space and different types of opportunities, habitat space. We start looking at all the various water quality elements, so wetlands, places where we're capturing runoff, spaces where we're taking a bypass, so some of the dirtier water that comes into the lake system, we're bypassing it so it doesn't go into the lake system anymore. All these little techniques and engineering pieces, they all look beautiful, but they all will add up to a much improved water quality. Circulation is a huge one. We want a pathway that goes all the way around the lake system that's a fairly robust multi-use pathway. And then ancillary smaller pathways where appropriate in certain districts around the lakes. And little points here and there where people can get out on the water, take advantage of maybe fishing or birding. Lighting, we have a strategy that looks at how intense the light is in different districts, different parts of the lake system. Go to the next one. All the kind of habitat and plant materials that we're going to be bringing in to actually revegetate areas. And we have a strategy for implementation. This is the most important thing. You don't just come in and build this thing in one day or in 1 year or even in 10 years, right? The first things we have to do is we need to get the water right. Then we start dealing with just the basic trail infrastructure. Then all of the amenities start to follow that, right? So there's about 10 different projects with different budgets and costs associated with each one that will happen over a series of years as funding is made available. And all this stuff will be guided by the master plan. There will, of course, be more meetings and things as each one of these projects is identified and funded, and all the issues with it have to get sorted out. But that's the basic approach to how we get to this master plan and how it gets built over years. If you think about Central Park in New York, when Olmsted built that thing, my landscape architecture professors are going to shake their finger. 150 years ago? Thank you, Max. I'm close. It's not done. He didn't go out and build that thing in 10 years and it's done. The Central Park Conservancy is still changing it, replanning it, doing all these different things with it because people change and the way that people use these spaces change. All right, next. So that's our basic, we're going to restore it. We're going to connect you guys to it. We're going to plant it. And then the next phases will start to be all the enhancements that get into this. Okay, so character, that's the next piece. What does it look like? So this is a view that looks from a drone, I guess. But this is May Street, okay? That's May Street. There's Dalrymple here. There's the I-10 bridge in the distance. So this is City Park Lake. And so you can see there's sort of an improved park that sits here at the head of the lake. There is an extension now of sort of this promenade piece. Lots of gardens, really what it is. Gardens and pathways that connect City Park up here all the way back down to this zone. There's a very simple but a slightly raised bridge that lets us connect the hydrology of these two lakes into a single piece. And it also lets potentially a crew team for LSU get under there so they can have a 2,000-meter race, which is what they need to be able to do to have a really robust team. Next. So this is if you're above Wampold Park. So you're looking at now probably May Street is back in the distance there. This is LSU Sorority Row is along here. East Lakeshore Drive is over there. So you can see Lakeshore Drive, you see the road that exists, and then you see that new multi-use pathway that's along the edge of it, right? So we're getting bicycles stay on the road, but we get people with strollers and joggers and all this stuff off to the side, right? Within Wampold Park, we've created some additional fill and some areas there now where it's easier to get a boat, a paddleboard, a canoe, a kayak, go fishing. All that stuff is much more intuitive and built into the fabric of the place. Over on Sorority Row, we have this idea of this sort of promenade that I'll show you in a minute that really puts more of a public face of LSU on the lakes. I mean, if you think about it, if you're not in a sorority, LSU kind of turns their back on the lakes in a lot of ways, physically, not mentally, but physically. And so the idea is to try to look for places where we can put the campus back on the lakes. Okay, next. So we're going to go through each one of these little red boxes really quick. Next. So at the head of the lake, this is up at City Park. There's the idea you can rent paddle boats like you can do at City Park Lake in New Orleans or at Central Park. cute little paddle boats. You can kind of rent them around, and families can go out and do stuff for the day on the lakes, right? There's the beginnings of this kind of promenade that brings you down along Dalrymple. Next. And so if you're under the I-10 bridge, it might start to look something like this. You've got some sound attenuation stuff up above. We're looking at putting habitat anywhere that we can, right? So there's the wetlands that are along the edges that start to do things. All of the plant materials that you see represented here, these are the actual trees and shrubs and grasses and wildflowers that we'll actually be using on this project. They grow here. Pollinators like them. Hummingbirds like them. All the various species that we're trying to get to stay here and use this area love this stuff. We've even looked at saying, hey, when we're going to try to attenuate the sound underneath the bridge, we can put bat infrastructure up there. They eat mosquitoes. We have them in Texas. It's like a huge thing. People come out and watch the bats at night. It sounds icky and scary and weird, but they don't bite you, I assure you. Next. Check out Congress Street Bridge, South Congress Street Bridge in Austin. It's pretty amazing. So this would be the, whoops, can you go back? So this would be along Dalrymple. This is this Dalrymple promenade idea. So here's your mixed-use bike path. A couple of little small zones where people can picnic, hang out if they want. Always looking for habitat up hanging in the trees. It's really interesting. Bird houses. Maybe there's purple martin houses that are kind of in the distance there within the wetlands. Next. Then if you look at LSU's bird sanctuary, we want to improve that. Next. So we'll put people out in it. So just really simple, beautiful structures like this. They're very artful. And they act as bird blinds on one side, so the birds can't see you, but you can see them. And on the other side, it really enhances the view. And you can see wood duck boxes back there. There's all kinds of habitat that we're constantly trying to put into these places. Next. Along LSU's edge, so Lod Cook is at the top there. The idea is this is not going to work, but there's a kind of big green sort of ellipse there. That's an activity lawn that the university can use. That's like the public space. Like if the public wants to come out for a meeting like this, that's the place where they can do those sorts of things. And show you what it looks like. So very simple bandstand. This is not a place where you have like the fireworks and you have a rock concert. I don't know who pick your band. The ones that you see lining, I guess, that are playing at all the casinos. They're not coming here. But the idea is that LSU would be great if their concert band could play there and people from the neighborhood can come out and watch it, or from the community. Simple, quiet little space. You could even host a wedding potentially. Or a meeting like this that wanted to happen in the evening outside into this, you could do it there. Along Sorority Row, it's very tight, very constrained, and it's really, if you're not, there as a member of a sorority or fraternity, it can feel like maybe you're not supposed to be there. So the idea is to make this feel much more open, much more part of the community. So you have this big sort of series of steps, this big promenade, a big lawn, people laying out, maybe even studying, you never know. Lots of canoes and kayaks, but just a beautiful place that's very much part of university life. A boathouse. This is an extension of the LSU Recreation Complex. So this is like so that LSU can take kids out and they can rent a kayak or a canoe if they want to. There may be, this is all stuff to be vetted with the university. There could be food and beverage there. That's not for sure. But the one thing that we do think we'd like to see, and that the university is getting more and more interested in, is the idea of their crew team having a boathouse here. And so they can store all their equipment, they can take it out, and they can do their practices on the lakes. And then along the Corporation Canal, so upgrades to that start to look like this. So you see these pathways are separated, bicycles and pedestrians, and then lots of zones for habitat. Campus Lake, this is the one that's filling up the fastest. So we're looking at sort of regrading that and looking at how this plugs into some of the new things that the university is doing with some of the girls' residence housing that's happening along there that's being torn down and restored. Our new buildings are being put up. Wampold Park, so take that little beach thing and kind of turn the volume up on that and make it much more exciting. Design it so we can have sand volleyball games there. Design it so people can go out and just kids can build a sand castle if they want to. It's not a beach that's in the water like a traditional beach. It's perched, it's sort of up above the water a little bit. But trying to add, again, more activities in these where appropriate in spaces like this where they already happen. So that might look like this. So there's your kind of beach in the front. We're only allowing purple and gold umbrellas. But you know, a little fishing platform, places where it's easy to put boats into the water. And then on East Lakeshore Drive, and this is just a little piece of it, this kind of continues all the way along, a meandering pathway that takes advantage of some of this new fill that's going to have to be pushed up against the edge there. In a lot of cases, we're restoring the South Lakeshore Drive. We're restoring a lot of the erosion that's happened over the years, but you end up getting pedestrians off of the road. They put them onto this mixed-use pathway. We'd like to see the roads go to one-way so that bicycle conflicts are reduced. But it becomes a very simple, beautiful place, and I think we have an illustration of what that might look like. So it looks like this. Very simple pathway. It's probably concrete, but then off to the side would probably be a gravel strip, because some people prefer to run on gravel as opposed to concrete, so we're trying to accommodate that. Occasionally, there may be a place to stop and sit. If there's older people that want to go out and exercise, we want them to be able to stop every, I don't know, mile, half mile, whatever we think is the right amount. But primarily, it's about trails. It's about this beautiful wetland that's full of irises and plant material that attract birds and other species. And so I think this is probably the most important image, because this is what most of the project is. It's about a simple trail. It's about some very simple and beautiful wetlands. And it's about trying to create habitat in the heart of the city in a place that people can come out, learn about it, and just do things that they don't maybe have access to right now. So I think that's the last slide. That's it. So what happens next? There's a book that we're going to put together that basically has all this information in it, but it's paired with other information. It has cost estimates for all this work. It prioritizes which piece you want to do first and which piece you should do last. There's a lot of engineering recommendations within it. There's a lot of information about habitat from all of our various consultants that are tied into this kind of final document. It'll make recommendations about how maintenance might work. It's going to explore ideas of, is there a conservancy or something that works alongside BREC and trying to figure out how this place is operated or maintained. All these things are explored. And then there's lots of other conversations that will happen as this thing gets implemented. Funding, of course, is a big part of it. BRAF has worked really hard. I think they've done a great job at actually taking, I think when we started this thing, they said, we're not going to build anything. We're not going to get any money. That's not our job. And they've actually gone out and done a big chunk of that already. So that's the project as we envision it. You will get access to this final booklet. I think in about 4 weeks, we'll do a draft. But that's it. So I know people will have questions and comments, but hopefully you guys will walk around and look at the drawings, and you'll think it's a pretty cool thing, and we should go do it. So, John, I don't know if you have anything else.
Thank you, Kendra. Just a couple of things. I think some of you are going to say, where do we go from here? I want to remind all of you that when the foundation started this, we said we would do the planning. And technically, we're at that point. Having said that, we've gotten so involved with this, had numbers of meetings and conversations that we've gone into starting looking at how do we pay for it. And I want to acknowledge that in that last session of the legislature that just completed, we have $13 million on paper. And I would caution you that it's there, but it's not there till you get it. I think the next phase would be, assuming we get funding, we would take this body of work with our engineers and consultants and convert it to construction documents so that at some point we can put out an RFP for this work to be done in terms of the dredging, assuming we have the dollars. And today we don't. But assuming we have the dollars, that would be the next phase. There's some additional work that needs to go on that. That would probably take at least another year. At some point in that process, we would probably start the applications for EPA permitting, which clearly are going to be needed before we can do the job. That might take a year to 18 months, so we don't want to start it too late, but we don't want to start it too early, because once you get it, you have to start the construction, and you have a 5-year window. So we have to figure out when that is appropriate, but we don't want to end up where we might have funding and have the construction documents but not have the permitting. So coordinating all of that is what we think we're going to do. I will tell you that the Baton Rouge Area Foundation is not going to dredge this. We have to talk about the process. I am not a dredger. I'm beginning to think I'm not a planner. But I think we will take it through the place where we can turn it over to the appropriate people to handle that part of the process. Those are discussions and decisions that have to be made. And let me also caution you that we are a place that's probably at best, and we've tried to push it as fast as we can in our planning, we're probably 2 to 3 years away from that. So if there are issues that still are bothering you, I want to caution you that there's still time. This is the last formal public meeting. Before we start doing all of that, there will be lots of public meetings, lots of engagement about what the construction project will be. We will see and hear from you many, many times. I think we have been open. We've taken your emails. We've talked to you. We've met with you. If there are issues, please call us, see us tonight, pass them on to us. We have plenty of time. Talk to your lawmakers who can help us with the funding. Encourage them to get behind the project. That's where we are. And I would tell you that we started with no money, and the fact that the legislature, in an extraordinarily tough year, in a tough financial time for this state, has at least earmarked $13 million for the project, puts us way ahead of where we thought we would be. And I give them the credit. They took the heat in a tough financial situation, and they said this is an important project for our community, and we owe them our gratitude. Please, if there are any real critical questions that I can answer about process, I'll do that. Otherwise, yes, ma'am.
Nothing has been said about security.
About what?
Security.
Okay.
Brad, Baton Rouge Police, you bring in a lot more people to the area. You're gonna have security issues. You know, and it takes sometimes an hour for a Brad Park Ranger to come to this area. So you bring in a lot more people. Has security issues been addressed at all?
I think in fairness, probably not in any great detail, Nancy. I think, you know, part of our conversations is that if we're successful enough to do this, we want to preserve this in some way. We've talked about creating a conservancy that would have representation from LSU, the city, BREC, you, and part of what we want to leave is what we've called a Bible, which is a document that specifies how this lake system will be maintained so that for decades to come, we've got a standard that we uphold. There needs to be coordination between all the owners because there are a lot of different owners around the lake. And I think security is certainly something that we ought to put on our list, ask all of our partners to start thinking about that. I think that's an absolutely appropriate question.
And what about parking and traffic?
It's bad, isn't it? We really ought to fix traffic in Baton Rouge. And I hope there's another foundation that takes care of that. Thank you for my bad humor. I think where there is parking, and let's be honest, there's not enough. There isn't enough today, and I think it's fair to say that we can't provide, nor do we want to provide, all the parking necessary for everybody that wants to use this lake at some point. And I would say in candor, it's an issue that we don't have the answer to. I would also tell you that we don't have a good answer for Stanford Avenue. I mean, it is dangerous. And being candid about it, we've looked at it, we've talked to people. We're giving you a document tonight that still needs some more work, and I would tell you that Stanford is at the top of our list in terms of our concerns about safety. Dalrymple is a close second on that. Parking, where we do have it, I think we've done a good bit of work on how we hide cars. We want them to be behind green trees. We want them to be hidden by people who live around the lakes. We don't want parking lots on the residential side at all. And when we start with that, there are very few places that we can park some cars. We've added a few, I think, in our planning along May Street, but we've tried to hide them, but we're not really increasing cars really by very much. One of the things that we've started talking about in the planning is the new Knock Knock Children's Museum that will be located just north of City Park. We assume that their families and children will want to come down and go fishing on the lakes. And so we have to look at that intersection and provide pedestrian crossways that aren't now there. We'd like to have docks built on that side of the lake so the kids can come fish. We've talked a lot about Dalrymple and why that really needs to be improved as a beautiful street, as an entranceway into LSU, but it's also a dangerous street already, and we need to look at some of the issues there. The neighborhood along the western side of Dalrymple have talked to us about how do they and their families and children cross the street. There's not a pedestrian light anywhere. So I think we have a total of 3 or 4 proposed pedestrian-controlled crossings at critical places that don't now exist. Our partners are the city parish. We've talked to the mayor's office. We'll continue having conversations with them. We've talked to the State Department of Transportation about issues related to the I-10 bridge. This is an ongoing conversation, and it is critical that we continue the conversation. But I want to be candid with you. We don't have all the answers to put in front of you tonight. I think we know what a lot of the remaining issues are, but they aren't simple. It'd been simple if everybody said, of course we'll give you a lane back on Stanford. I thought we were going to get run out of town when we suggested it. But we need to look at that and see if we can't find a solution that is a balance between the traffic concerns, the safety of people walking and bicycling along that, and frankly, those of you who live around there and don't want us to disturb you in an inappropriate way. So we've got a little more work to do there.
Just curious, who are the governmental entities of the other players that have to, you're not going to let a contract be wrapped, I'm assuming?
No, I don't see us doing that. We don't own the lakes. What I want to remind people is that when the Corps issued their study in '08, it sat on a shelf. In '14, the Baton Rouge Area Foundation convened a number of people and said, we're concerned that the lakes continue to deteriorate, and would you mind if we started this conversation that we're having here? We made very clear that ours was a community engagement, which you're doing a part of tonight, and a planning. We do not commit and never have said that the Baton Rouge Area Foundation is going to write a check, although we are good at trying to raise money, and as you've indicated, I've told you tonight, we have $13 million, largely because of ours and other people's efforts, particularly our lawmakers. We're not in the dredging business, and we won't be. But the thing that you also need to remember is that the owners of the lakes have to agree on anything that has to happen. So we see at some point our getting it to a construction point, to an RFP process, turning it over to a government entity that will do it, and have some type of cooperative endeavor agreements between all the owners that say now we can do it according to these terms. And it will be, it's Breck, the city, LSU. And then there are landowners that are around the lake that obviously have a voice in that as well. And whatever happens and whoever does it, it will be a transparent process. This thing is going to be open. And I would remind you one more time, you got plenty of time to talk to us about, and to your elected officials about how you want it done. I don't want to spend all the time doing this, so again, let me thank you on behalf of all of us. It has been a wonderful experience. We've averaged, as I said earlier, 300 to 350 people. You've come out by your show of hands earlier. Many of you have been here every time, and we're quite impressed by that. Please stay. Please look. The consultants are in the room, as I said earlier. Would y'all raise your hands? Okay. Find them, talk to them, ask questions about it. I'll be here as well. Thank you again for your support. We appreciate it.